My name is Margaret, and I'm about to tell you the most heartbreaking story I've ever witnessed. A story that happened right before my eyes on the Whitmore plantation in Louisiana, 1855. A story about two souls born on the same day, in the same room, from the same womb, but destined to live worlds apart. This is a story about mirrors that lie and truths that destroy. I remember that stormy August night like it was yesterday. The rain hammered against the plantation house windows while lightning tore through the sky. Inside the slave quarters, a woman's screams mixed with the thunder. Her name was Sarah, and she was giving birth. But what nobody expected, what nobody could have imagined, was that she wasn't bringing one life into this world, she was bringing two. The first baby girl came out crying, her skin dark like mahogany, her eyes full of life. The midwife wrapped her quickly in old cotton rags. But then came the second one. Oh, God, the second one. When she emerged, the room fell silent. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the candlelight, her hair light brown with hints of gold. The midwife gasped and dropped the scissors she was holding. Master Whitmore was called immediately. I watched from the doorway, my heart pounding as he entered that small cabin. His face went white when he saw the two babies. Everyone in that room knew the truth in that instant. Everyone understood what those two different faces meant. Master Whitmore had forced himself on Sarah months ago. We all knew it. The whole plantation knew it. But now there was living proof lying in front of us, crying for milk and warmth. The master's jaw clenched. He looked at Sarah, exhausted and bleeding on that dirty mattress, then at the two babies. Without a word, he picked up the white-skinned baby, just took her right out of Sarah's arms while she was too weak to resist. "This one comes with me," he said coldly. "The other one is yours to keep." Sarah's scream that night still echoes in my mind. It wasn't the scream of physical pain. It was the sound of a mother's heart being torn in half. She reached out desperately, but Master Whitmore had already turned his back, the pale baby wrapped in his coat. That moment changed everything. Two sisters separated by a door and a lifetime of lies. The white baby was named Victoria. She grew up in the big house, raised by Master Whitmore and his bitter, childless wife, Catherine. They told everyone she was an orphan they'd adopted from distant relatives. Victoria wore silk dresses, learned to read and write, played the piano in the parlor. She had everything a plantation daughter could want. The dark-skinned baby was named Grace. She grew up in the slave quarters with Sarah, learning to pick cotton before she could read, working from sunrise to sunset. She wore rough burlap, slept on a straw mattress, and knew the sting of the overseer's whip before she turned 10.
They looked so alike, those two. Same eyes, same nose, same curve of their lips when they smiled. But nobody saw it. Or maybe nobody wanted to see it. How could the master's precious white daughter look like a slave girl? It was impossible, unthinkable. I watched them grow up, these twin souls living parallel lives that never touched. I worked in the big house, so I saw both of them every day. I saw Victoria throw tantrums when her dresses weren't ironed perfectly. I saw Grace flinch every time someone raised their voice. I saw Sarah stare at the big house with tears in her eyes, watching the daughter she'd never hold again. Victoria was cruel. Oh, God, she was so cruel. By the time she turned 18, she'd become as cold as winter frost. She treated the slaves worse than Master Whitmore himself. She seemed to take special pleasure in punishing Sarah, though she never knew why that particular slave woman always looked at her with such desperate, loving eyes. "Mother," Victoria would say to Catherine, her voice dripping with disgust, "that woman Sarah keeps staring at me. It makes my skin crawl. Can't we sell her?" Catherine would pat her hand gently. Now, dear, she's been with us for years. She's harmless." But what really disturbed Victoria, what kept her awake at night, was Grace, the slave girl who looked almost like her reflection in a dark mirror. "I can't stand it," confessed Victoria one afternoon as I brushed her hair. The late summer sun poured through the bedroom windows, and I could smell jasmine from the garden below. "That slave girl, Grace, people say we look alike. Can you imagine me looking like a slave?" My hands trembled as I continued brushing. "I don't see the resemblance, Miss Victoria." "Liar," she spat. "Everyone sees it. Even Richard noticed." Richard Blackwood was Victoria's fiancé, a wealthy plantation owner's son from Charleston. Their wedding was planned for October, just 2 months away. The whole plantation was preparing for it. But something had changed in Richard during his last visit. The engagement party was magnificent. The plantation house glowed with hundreds of candles. The smell of roasted pig and sweet potatoes filled the air. White guests in their finest clothes danced and laughed, while slaves served champagne and delicacies. I moved through the crowd carrying a silver tray, invisible as always. Richard Blackwood stood on the veranda with Victoria, his hand possessively on her waist. He was handsome in that cold, aristocratic way, with sharp features and calculating eyes. But I noticed something that night. Every time Grace walked by carrying drinks or clearing plates, Richard's eyes would follow her. His jaw would tighten, his expression would darken. Victoria noticed too. "Richard," she said sweetly, but there was steel underneath, "you're staring at the sleighs again." He turned to her, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry, darling. It's just that girl, the one with the dark skin. She looks remarkably like you." Victoria's face went pale in the candlelight. "Don't be absurd." "I'm serious, Victoria. The resemblance is uncanny. The shape of her face, her eyes, the way she moves. If she were white, you could be twins." He laughed uncomfortably. "It's quite disturbing, actually." I watched Victoria's hands clench around her champagne glass. "She's a slave, Richard, a piece of property. There is no resemblance." But Richard couldn't let it go. Throughout the evening, I heard him mention it to other guests. "Have you noticed that slave girl looks just like my fiancé? Quite extraordinary, isn't it?" He said it as a curiosity, almost as a joke, but his eyes held something darker. Disgust, discomfort, fear even. He was afraid people would think his pure white bride had Negro blood. In his world, that was worse than death itself. The party ended late. As I helped Victoria undress in her bedroom, she was silent, too silent. She stood in front of her full-length mirror, staring at her reflection with an expression I'd never seen before. Horror mixed with rage. "Margaret," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "tell me the truth. Do I really look like that slave?" I chose my words carefully, my heart pounding. "Miss Victoria, you're beautiful. Grace is just a slave girl. There's no comparison." "That's not what I asked." She turned to face me, and I saw tears in her eyes, tears of fury. "Richard thinks we look alike. His friends think so too. I saw them whispering, staring. This wedding is supposed to be perfect, and now everyone will be looking at me and seeing her face, seeing a slave's face." Miss Victoria, I'm sure, get out, she said coldly. Just get out. I left her alone with her mirror and her rage. As I walked down the dark hallway, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Victoria was crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure hatred. The next morning, everything changed. Richard Blackwood arrived early, his face serious. He requested a private meeting with Master Whitmore. I served them coffee in the study, and though they lowered their voices, I heard enough.
"I'm very sorry, sir," Richard was saying, "but I cannot go through with this wedding." Master Whitmore nearly dropped his coffee cup. "What? Richard, what are you talking about?" "It's the resemblance," Richard said bluntly. "Your daughter and that slave girl, Grace. People are talking. They're saying Victoria must have Negro blood. My family's reputation cannot survive such rumors." "That's absurd!" Master Whitmore stood up, his face red. "Victoria is white, pure white. I adopted her from my cousin's family. There's no Negro blood in her veins." "Then explain the resemblance," Richard challenged. "Explain why she looks identical to your slave." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Master Whitmore's hands trembled. He knew the truth, of course. He'd always known, but he'd buried it so deep, told the lie so many times that maybe even he had started to believe it. "Coincidence," Master Whitmore finally said weakly. "Just coincidence." Richard shook his head. "I'm sorry, the wedding is off. I'll send a formal letter this afternoon." He stood up, adjusted his coat, and walked out without looking back. I found Victoria in the garden an hour later. She was sitting on a marble bench under the magnolia tree, perfectly still, staring at nothing. The morning sun filtered through the leaves, and I could smell honeysuckle on the breeze. Birds sang cheerfully, completely unaware of the disaster unfolding. "Miss Victoria?" I approached carefully. She didn't look at me. "He broke it off. Richard broke off our engagement." "I'm so sorry, miss." "Because of her. Because of that slave. Because people think I look like her. Because people think I might have Negro blood." She turned to me then, and what I saw in her eyes terrified me. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was something cold and calculated and absolutely deadly. "She has to disappear, Grace. She has to die. As long as she's alive, I'll never escape this. I'll never be able to marry anyone. I'll be ruined." My throat went dry. "Miss Victoria, you can't mean—" "I mean exactly what I said." She stood up, smoothing her dress with perfect composure. "That girl is going to die, Margaret. And you're going to help me." "No," I whispered. "No, I can't." Victoria grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. "You can and you will, unless you want to join her." Evil isn't always loud and violent. Sometimes it's calm and calculated, wearing a beautiful dress and smelling like French perfume. The days after Richard's departure were suffocating. The whole plantation seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Victoria moved through the house like a ghost, her face a perfect mask of grief to anyone who looked. But I knew better. I saw her watching Grace from the windows, tracking her movements like a predator studying prey. Master Whitmore tried to comfort his daughter, but she pushed him away. "Leave me alone," she'd say coldly. "This is all your fault for keeping that girl here." Sarah knew something was wrong. A mother always knows. I saw her pull Grace aside one evening near the well, the sun setting blood red behind them. The smell of wood smoke from the cooking fires drifted through the air. "Baby," Sarah whispered urgently, glancing around to make sure nobody was listening. "You need to be careful. Stay away from the big house. Stay away from Miss Victoria." Grace looked confused. "Mama, why? What's wrong?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Just trust me, please. I've got a bad feeling." "Is this about people saying we look alike?" Grace asked softly. "The other slaves have been talking. They say that's why Mr. Blackwood called off the wedding." "Oh, baby." Sarah pulled her daughter close. "You don't understand. You can't understand, but you're in danger." I wanted to run to them. I wanted to tell them everything, to warn them properly. But Victoria was watching me constantly now. She knew I'd heard her plan. She knew I was the weak link. That night, Victoria came to my small room in the servants' quarters. She'd never done that before. She sat on my narrow bed, looking around at my humble possessions with barely concealed disgust. "Margaret," she said sweetly, "we need to talk about our plan." "I told you, Miss Victoria, I can't be part of this. I won't." She smiled then, and it was the coldest smile I'd ever seen. "You know what happened to the last slave who defied me? Her name was Ruth. She accidentally drank water contaminated with rat poison. Very tragic." My blood ran cold. Ruth had died 6 months ago. Everyone thought it was bad luck. But now, "You wouldn't," I whispered. "I would, I have, and I will again if you don't help me." She leaned forward, and I could smell lavender perfume, expensive and cloying. "Here's what's going to happen. Next Saturday is the Harvest Festival. Everyone will be drinking, celebrating. Grace will be serving food and drinks. You're going to put something in her cup, something from my father's medicine cabinet. It will look like she fell asleep drunk and never woke up. Simple, clean." "Why me?" I asked desperately. "Why do you need me?" "Because you work in the house. You have access to the medicine cabinet. And because if anything goes wrong, you'll be the one who hangs, not me." She stood up, smoothing her nightgown. "You have until Saturday to decide, Margaret. Help me kill her or join her in the grave. Those are your only options." She left me alone in the darkness, listening to the crickets chirp outside my window and the distant sound of slaves singing in their quarters. I thought about running away, but where would I go? I thought about telling Master Whitmore, but would he believe a slave over his precious daughter? And even if he did, would he protect me from Victoria's revenge? I prayed that night. I prayed harder than I'd ever prayed in my life. I prayed for God to show me a way out, to protect Grace, to stop this evil plan. But the heavens stayed silent, and Saturday kept getting closer. Sometimes the hardest thing in life isn't choosing between good and evil. It's choosing between evil and your own survival. During those terrible days before Saturday, I watched Grace more closely. She was beautiful, that girl. Not in the delicate porcelain way that white society valued, but in a strong, genuine way. She smiled despite everything. She sang while she worked. She had her mother's kindness and something else, something unbreakable in her spirit. One afternoon, I was hanging laundry when Grace approached me. The cotton sheets flapped in the wind, and I could smell rain coming. "Miss Margaret," she said shyly. Grace always called me Miss, even though we were both slaves. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey." Why does Miss Victoria hate me so much? I've never done anything to her. I try to stay out of her way, but she looks at me like she wants me dead. I nearly dropped the sheet I was holding. Why would you say that? I see it in her eyes. Grace looked down at her hands, rough and calloused from work. Ever since Mr. Blackwood broke off the engagement, she stares at me with this look. It scares me. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to scream the truth. Your sisters, your twins, that woman who wants you dead is your blood. But the words stuck in my throat like thorns. Just be careful, I said finally. Stay close to your mother. Don't go anywhere alone. Grace nodded slowly, fear flickering in her eyes. It's the Harvest Festival on Saturday. Mama said I should pretend to be sick, not go, but if I don't work, they'll whip me. Then work, but stay where people can see you. Don't eat or drink anything unless your mother gives it to you directly. She looked at me strangely. Miss Margaret, you know something. Please tell me what's happening. Before I could answer, we heard footsteps. Victoria appeared around the corner of the house, her blonde hair shining in the sunlight. She looked at us, and her smile was poisonous. Grace, she called out sweetly, I need you to help serve at the festival on Saturday. You'll be pouring drinks for the guests. Make sure you're there. Yes, Miss Victoria, she said quietly, her head bowed. Victoria's eyes met mine. The message was clear. This is happening. Saturday is coming. Choose wisely. Friday night arrived too quickly. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Tomorrow was the Harvest Festival, and I still hadn't decided what to do. Should I poison Grace to save myself? Should I refuse and face Victoria's wrath? Should I run away and leave everyone to their fate? I was walking past Master Whitmore's study around midnight when I heard voices. The door was slightly open, and candlelight spilled into the dark hallway. I recognized Master Whitmore's voice, slurred with whiskey. I should have sent them both away, he was saying. Should have sold Sarah and the dark baby the day they were born. But Catherine wanted a child so badly, and when she saw that white baby... Another voice responded. It was the old doctor, Dr. Morrison, who'd been treating Master Whitmore's heart condition. You made a choice, Edmund. Right or wrong, you can't change it now. But Victoria is suffering because of it, Master Whitmore said, and I heard genuine pain in his voice. Richard Blackwood broke off the engagement because people said she looked like that slave girl. He practically accused her of having Negro blood. My daughter's reputation is ruined. Your daughter, Dr. Morrison said carefully, or Sarah's daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Both, Master Whitmore finally admitted. They're both my daughters. God help me, they're both mine. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. Even though I'd known, suspected, hearing him admit it out loud was shocking. Does Sarah know? Dr. Morrison asked. She knows I took one baby and left her the other. She doesn't know the white one was also hers. She thinks I adopted a baby from relatives. Master Whitmore's voice broke. Sometimes I see her looking at Victoria with such longing. I think part of her knows, deep down, the way mothers know. And Victoria? Victoria knows nothing. She thinks Catherine is her real mother, that she's pure white with a pedigree going back generations. If she knew the truth, he laughed bitterly. If she knew that slave girl she despises is her twin sister, born from the same womb on the same night, it would destroy her. I heard footsteps and quickly moved away from the door, my heart hammering. I stood in the shadows as Dr. Morrison left the study, and then I heard Master Whitmore crying, actually crying.
a sound I never thought I'd hear from that hard, cruel man. But it didn't matter. His tears didn't matter, because tomorrow Victoria was planning to murder her own sister, and nobody was stopping it. I made my decision then. I had to tell Sarah the truth. All of it. She deserved to know. Both her daughters deserved to know. Even if it meant my death, I couldn't let Grace die without knowing she had a sister, that she wasn't alone in this world. I found Sarah in the slave quarters. She was sitting by a small fire, mending clothes by the dim light. The smell of cornbread and beans hung in the air. When she saw my face, she set down her sewing immediately. "What's wrong, Margaret? You look like you've seen death itself." "Sarah." I knelt beside her, my voice urgent and low. "I need to tell you something. Something about Grace. Something about Victoria." She gripped my hands. "Tell me. I know my baby is in danger. I can feel it in my bones." So I told her everything about Victoria's plan to poison Grace at the festival, about overhearing Master Whitmore's confession, about the night 18 years ago when she gave birth to 2 babies, not 1, about how Victoria was her daughter too, her twin, separated by skin color and cruelty. Sarah's face went through 1,000 emotions: shock, disbelief, horror, understanding, and finally a deep, soul-crushing grief. "Both of them?" she whispered. "Both my babies?" "Yes, you're Victoria's mother too, Sarah. She just doesn't know it." Sarah stood up, swaying slightly. I steadied her. She walked to the door of the small cabin and looked toward the big house, visible in the moonlight on the hill. The smell of jasmine drifted on the night breeze. "My baby girl," she said softly, "wants to kill her own sister. My white daughter wants to murder my black daughter, and neither of them knows their blood." "What do we do?" I asked desperately. "The festival is tomorrow. I'm supposed to put poison in Grace's drink." Sarah turned to me, and I saw something change in her eyes. A mother's determination, a lioness protecting her cubs. "You're not going to poison anyone," she said firmly. "I have a different plan. But Margaret, when this is over, one way or another, the truth has to come out. Both my daughters need to know who they really are." "Sarah, if Victoria finds out, she'll—" "She'll what? Hate me more than she already does? Kill me instead of Grace?" Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been dead inside since the night they took my baby from my arms. I've been walking around like a ghost for 18 years, watching one daughter suffer while the other lives in luxury, never able to hold either of them, never able to tell them the truth. Maybe it's time for the ghost to wake up." She told me her plan then. It was dangerous. It was possibly suicidal, but it was the only way to save Grace and reveal the truth. I agreed to help her, because what choice did I have? At least this way, I'd die doing the right thing. There's a special kind of strength that comes from having nothing left to lose. Sarah had lost everything 18 years ago. Now she was finally ready to fight back. We spent the rest of the night preparing. Sarah wrote something on a piece of paper, carefully forming each letter. She'd taught herself to read and write in secret over the years, practicing with charcoal on scraps of wood. She folded the paper and hid it in her dress. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the mirror would finally tell the truth.
Saturday arrived with brilliant sunshine and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The Harvest Festival was the plantation's biggest celebration of the year. Slaves had been cooking for days, roasting pigs and chickens, baking pies and cakes. Long tables were set up under the oak trees, laden with food. White guests from neighboring plantations arrived in their carriages, dressed in their finest clothes. Victoria wore a pale yellow dress that made her look like an angel. Her hair was perfectly curled, her smile practiced and false. She moved through the crowd with grace, accepting condolences about her broken engagement with practiced sympathy. "These things happen," she'd say sweetly. "Richard and I simply weren't meant to be. I'm sure I'll find someone better suited to me." But I saw her watching Grace, always watching, waiting for the moment when I'd slip the poison into her drink. Grace worked alongside the other slaves, serving food and pouring drinks. She looked exhausted, terrified. Sarah had told her about the danger, but not about Victoria being her sister. That revelation would come later, Sarah said. First, they had to survive the day. The poison was in my pocket. Victoria had given it to me that morning, wrapped in a white handkerchief. "Make it look natural," she'd whispered. "Wait until she's drinking from her own cup, not serving others. I don't want anyone else hurt, just her." "Just her, just your sister," I wanted to scream. "Just your twin, your blood, your mirror image in darker skin." The festival reached its height around noon. Musicians played fiddles and banjos. White guests danced and laughed. The smell of roasted meat and sweet potatoes filled the air. Master Whitmore stood on the veranda, drunk and jovial, welcoming everyone to his plantation. That's when Sarah made her move. She walked right up to the veranda steps, bold as anything. Slaves weren't supposed to approach the white guests, especially not during celebrations. Every slave in that yard froze, watching in horror. What was Sarah doing? "Master Whitmore," Sarah called out loudly, her voice cut through the music and laughter. "I need to speak with you. It's urgent." Master Whitmore's face turned red. "Sarah, get back to work. This is not the time." "It's about your daughters," Sarah said clearly. "Both of them." The silence stopped. Every conversation ceased. Hundreds of eyes turned to watch. Victoria pushed through the crowd, her face pale with fury. "How dare you?" Victoria hissed at Sarah. "You filthy slave! How dare you interrupt?" "I'm your mother," Sarah said calmly. She looked directly at Victoria with those eyes full of love and pain. "Victoria Whitmore, I am your mother, and Grace is your sister, your twin sister. We were all born on the same night 18 years ago." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on that grass. Victoria stared at Sarah with an expression of pure horror. "You're insane," Victoria whispered. "Guards, remove this woman." "Tell them, Edmund," Sarah turned to Master Whitmore. "Tell everyone the truth. Tell your precious white daughter that she came from my womb, that her blood is the same as mine, that she and Grace are twins." Master Whitmore looked like he might collapse. His face went from red to white to gray. His hands trembled as he gripped the veranda railing. "It's true," he said finally, his voice barely audible.
"What?" Victoria screamed. "Papa, tell her she's lying. Tell everyone this slave is lying." "I can't," Master Whitmore said, tears running down his face. "Because she's telling the truth. Sarah is your biological mother. I forced myself on her 18 years ago. She gave birth to twins, one with dark skin, one with light skin. I took you and raised you as my adopted daughter. I left Grace with Sarah." The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers. Victoria stood frozen, her perfect facade crumbling.
She looked from Master Whitmore to Sarah to Grace, who had dropped the pitcher she was holding and stood staring with her mouth open. "No," Victoria said. "No, no, no, this is a trick. This is some kind of sick joke." Sarah pulled out the paper she'd written. "I have proof. Margaret, Dr. Morrison, the midwife who's still alive in town, they all know the truth. And if you look in a mirror, Victoria, really look, you'll see it too. You and Grace have the same eyes, the same nose, the same hands. You're twins, you're sisters." Victoria started backing away, shaking her head violently. "I'm white! I'm white! I can't be! I'm not!" "You're both," Sarah said gently. "You're both black and white, just like Grace, just like me. The only difference is the color of your skin. But inside, you're sisters, blood sisters." Grace was crying now, silent tears running down her face. She looked at Victoria with an expression of desperate hope. "Sister?" she whispered. But Victoria's face twisted with rage and disgust. "Don't you dare call me that. I am not your sister. I am white, pure white." "You're a murderer," I said suddenly, stepping forward. All eyes turned to me. "I planned to kill Grace today. You gave me poison to put in her drink." I pulled out the handkerchief with the poison and held it up. She was going to murder her own twin sister rather than accept the truth about her blood. More gasps, more whispers. Victoria looked around wildly at all the shocked, horrified faces staring at her. "They're lying," she said desperately. "All of them are lying. Papa, tell them." But Master Whitmore had collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands. He was broken, finally broken by the weight of his own sins. The truth is like the sun. You can hide from it for a while, but eventually it will rise and illuminate everything. Victoria ran. She grabbed her yellow skirts and ran from the veranda through the shocked crowd toward the house. Sarah called after her, "Victoria, please let me explain." But Victoria kept running, her perfect curls bouncing, her face twisted in anguish. Grace started to follow her, but Sarah grabbed her arm. "Wait, baby, give her a moment. This is too much for her." "But Mama," Grace said through her tears, "she's my sister, my twin. All this time I had a sister and nobody told me." Sarah pulled both her living daughters into her arms for the first time in 18 years. Well, tried to. Victoria was gone, but Sarah held Grace tightly, both of them sobbing. The white guests began leaving quickly, embarrassed and scandalized. The party was over. The plantation's darkest secret was exposed. I found Victoria an hour later in her bedroom. She'd locked herself in, but I had a spare key from my years of service. She was sitting in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection with wild, desperate eyes. She'd removed all her jewelry, pulled her hair down, wiped off her powder and rouge. She looked younger this way, more vulnerable, and yes, more like Grace. "Get out," she said without looking at me. "Just get out, Margaret." "I can't do that, Miss Victoria." "Don't call me that," she screamed, picking up a perfume bottle and throwing it at the wall. Glass shattered and the scent of roses filled the room. "Don't call me Miss. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. I'm "You're Sarah's daughter," I said gently. "You're Grace's sister. You're human, Victoria. That's what you are." She laughed hysterically. "Human? I'm an abomination. I'm the product of rape. My father forced himself on a slave, and I'm the result. I'm nothing but a dirty secret." "So is Grace," I pointed out, "but she's still worthy of love, still worthy of living." Victoria's face crumpled. She put her head in her hands and sobbed. "I was going to kill her. Oh, God, Margaret, I was going to murder my own sister. What kind of monster am I?"
I sat down beside her on the bed. "You're someone who was raised in a world full of lies, someone who was taught that skin color determines worth, someone who was poisoned by hatred and fear long before you ever touched actual poison." "I called her terrible names," Victoria whispered. "I hit her once when she spilled water on my dress. I laughed when the overseer whipped her. I treated her worse than an animal, and all along she was my sister, my twin. You didn't know." "Would it have mattered?" whispered Victoria. "Would I have treated her better if I'd known, or would I have hated her more for reminding me of what I really am?" I didn't have an answer to that. The question hung in the air between us, heavy and damning. There was a soft knock at the door. We both looked up. Through the door I heard Grace's voice, quiet and uncertain.
"Victoria? It's me, Grace. I wanted to talk to you, if that's okay." Victoria's whole body tensed. She looked at me with panic in her eyes. "I can't face her. I can't." "You have to," I said firmly. "She's your sister. She deserves that much." Victoria stood up slowly, smoothing her wrinkled dress with shaking hands. She walked to the door like someone walking to their own execution. She unlocked it and pulled it open. Grace stood in the hallway, still wearing her rough work clothes. Her face was tear-stained but hopeful. The two of them stood there, face to face, truly looking at each other for the first time, seeing themselves in each other. "Hi," Grace said softly. "Hi," Victoria whispered back. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Grace did something unexpected. She smiled, a small, tentative smile full of forgiveness that Victoria didn't deserve. "We have the same dimple," Grace said, pointing to her left cheek. "Right there. I never noticed before." Victoria's hand went to her own cheek, feeling the matching dimple. Fresh tears spilled down her face. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Grace, for everything, for how I treated you, for planning to—" "I know," Grace said. "Miss Margaret told me everything, about the poison, about Mr. Blackwood, about why you wanted me gone." She took a deep breath. "I forgive you." "How?" Victoria asked in anguish. "How can you possibly forgive me?" "Because you're my sister," Grace said simply, "and because I know what it's like to live in a world that judges you by your skin. You were taught to hate yourself, Victoria. You were taught that having my blood made you less than human. That's not your fault." Victoria shook her head violently. "It doesn't excuse what I did, what I almost did." "No," Grace agreed, "it doesn't excuse it, but I still forgive you because that's what sisters do." Forgiveness isn't about excusing the hurt. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of hatred. Victoria took a step forward, then another. Then she did something I never thought I'd see. She wrapped her arms around Grace and held her tight. The white sister and the black sister, the privileged daughter and the enslaved daughter, twins separated by color and cruelty, finally embracing. "I don't deserve you," Victoria sobbed into Grace's shoulder. "That's okay," Grace said, holding her just as tightly. "Love isn't about deserving, it's about choosing, and I choose you, sister." They stood there in that doorway, holding each other, crying together, and somewhere below, Sarah watched from the yard and wept too, finally seeing her two daughters together after 18 years of separation. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. The smell of the abandoned feast still lingered in the air.
The shattered pieces of the plantation's perfect facade lay everywhere. But something new was beginning, something real.
The days following the revelation were chaos. Half the white guests who'd witnessed the scene spread the story across Louisiana. The other half tried to pretend it never happened. Master Whitmore took to his bed, his heart condition worsening. Catherine, his wife, left the plantation without a word, returning to her family in Charleston. She couldn't bear the shame of having raised a child with slave blood as her own daughter. Victoria moved out of the big house. She insisted on it. She took a small room in the servants' quarters, near Sarah and Grace. The other slaves didn't know what to make of it. This white woman, this former mistress, now living among them by choice. "I need to understand," Victoria told me one evening. We were sitting outside the cabin she now shared with Sarah and Grace, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. The smell of evening primrose filled the air. "I need to understand their world, my world, the world I came from." Grace sat beside her, teaching her to shell peas. Their hands moved in rhythm, so similar despite the different colors. Victoria's fingers were soft and uncalloused. Grace's were rough from years of work. But they had the same long, elegant shape, the same quick, graceful movements. "It's hard work," Grace said gently when Victoria fumbled and dropped a pea. "Takes practice." "I've never had to work before," Victoria admitted. "Not real work. I'd ring a bell and servants would come. I'd snap my fingers and things would happen. I never thought about who was doing it all, never thought about the hands that made my life comfortable." Sarah watched them from the doorway, a smile on her worn face. "You're learning, baby. Both my babies are learning." But not everyone was happy about the changes. The overseer, a brutal man named Jackson, cornered me one morning near the cotton fields. "This is madness," he hissed. "A white woman living with slaves? Master Whitmore has lost his mind. The whole plantation is talking. We'll have a rebellion on our hands if this continues." "She's not white," I said quietly. "Not according to the laws you enforce, anyway. 1 drop of Negro blood makes her black. That's what you've always said." His face turned purple with rage. "She was raised white. She lived as white. You can't just change that overnight." "But that's exactly what happened. Overnight, she went from being a privileged white woman to being the daughter of a slave. The only thing that changed was what people knew about her. She's the same person she always was." Jackson spat on the ground near my feet. "Mark my words, this won't end well. People don't change. That girl has white blood in her, same as black. She'll always be torn between 2 worlds, and neither world will accept her." He was partially right. Victoria struggled terribly in those first weeks. She wasn't used to the heat of working in the fields. Her hands blistered from holding tools. Her back ached from bending over crops. She cried herself to sleep most nights, Grace holding her, soothing her. "I'm so weak," Victoria sobbed one night. I heard them through the thin cabin walls. "I can't do this. I'm not strong like you." "You are strong. You're learning. You're trying. That takes more strength than you know." "I had everything," Victoria said bitterly. "Beautiful clothes, good food, education, respect. And now I have nothing. I'm nobody. I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're my sister," Grace said firmly. "You're Sarah's daughter. You're Victoria. That's who you are. Everything else is just noise." Sarah's voice joined them in the darkness. Baby girl, I know this is hard, but you're finally free. For the first time in your life, you're free to be who you really are, not who people expected you to be, not who the lies said you were, just you. But who am I? Victoria asked desperately. I'm not white enough for white society. I'm not black enough to truly understand what Grace has suffered. I'm stuck in between, belonging nowhere. Then make your own place, Sarah said. Make a place where both your daughters can belong, a place where the color of skin doesn't determine worth, where twins aren't separated because one is dark and one is light. It was a beautiful dream, but dreams and reality are very different things. Master Whitmore died 3 weeks after the revelation. His heart simply gave out, the doctor said, but I think it was guilt that killed him. Guilt for what he'd done to Sarah, guilt for separating his daughters, guilt for building a life on lies and violence. He left a will. It shocked everyone. He'd freed Sarah, Grace, and Victoria. Not just freed them, he'd left them part of the plantation, a small piece of land, and enough money to start over. I can't undo the past, his will read. I can't give back the years I stole or heal the wounds I caused, but I can give my daughters a chance at a future. Sarah, Grace, Victoria, you are all free. Build something better than what I built. Love each other in the ways I never learned to love. Victoria read the will out loud to Sarah and Grace, her voice shaking. When she finished, all 3 of them sat in silence, processing what it meant. "We're free," Grace signally whispered. "Mama, we're actually free." Sarah laughed and cried at the same time. Free! After all these years, free! Victoria looked down at her hands, blistered and dirty from field work. Free to do what? Go where? White society won't accept me anymore. I'm ruined. Then we'll build our own society, Grace said boldly. The 3 of us, on our own land. We'll show people that families don't have to be torn apart by color, that love is stronger than hate. Freedom is terrifying when you've been a slave your whole life. It's equally terrifying when you've been a prisoner of privilege and lies. They used Master Whitmore's inheritance to buy a small plot of land about 10 miles from the plantation. It wasn't much, just 20 acres with a run-down cabin and a barn that needed repairs. But it was theirs, truly theirs. I left the plantation to help them. I couldn't stay in that place anymore, not after everything I'd witnessed. Several other freed slaves joined us too, people who wanted to build something new, something better. We worked from dawn to dusk that first year. Victoria learned to plant seeds, to harvest crops, to cook over an open fire. Her hands became as rough as Grace's, her skin tanned from the sun. The delicate, porcelain-skinned girl disappeared, replaced by someone stronger, someone real. But the neighboring white farmers made life difficult. They refused to sell us supplies. They spread rumors that we were corrupting the social order, teaching slaves to rise up. Some nights we'd hear riders outside, men shouting threats. Once, someone burned part of our crop. Another time, they poisoned our well. "They're trying to drive us away," Grace said one evening. We were all sitting around the fire after a long day of work. The smell of cornbread baking filled the small cabin. "They can't stand seeing us succeed." "Let them try," Sarah said firmly. "I spent 18 years watching my daughters suffer on opposite sides of a line I couldn't cross. I'm not running now, not when we're finally together." Victoria stared into the fire, her face troubled. "Maybe I should leave, go north where nobody knows me. You 2 would have an easier time without me here."
Don't you dare. Grace grabbed her sister's hand. Don't you dare abandon us now. We need you. I need you. But I bring you trouble. My presence here makes everything harder. Life is hard anyway, Sarah said. At least now we're facing it together as a family. Family. The word still felt strange on Victoria's tongue. She'd grown up thinking Catherine was her mother, Master Whitmore her father, that she came from good white stock with a proud lineage. Now she knew the truth. Her mother was a former slave. Her sister looked like her reflection in darker skin. Her father was a rapist who'd torn their family apart. "Tell me about the night we were born," Victoria said suddenly. "I need to know everything." Grace's eyes grew distant, remembering. It was August, middle of a terrible storm. Thunder shaking the walls, rain coming down so hard you couldn't see 3 feet in front of you. I was alone in the cabin when the pain started. The midwife came running, Margaret with her. I was so scared. I was only 16 years old, carrying a baby I didn't want, conceived in violence. Victoria flinched, but Grace continued. Then you both started coming. The midwife was shocked when Grace was born dark, but when you came out light, Victoria, the whole room went silent. We all knew what it meant. We knew Master Whitmore would be called. We knew everything was about to change.
"What did you feel?" Victoria asked quietly. "When he took me away?" Sarah's voice broke. "Like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. I screamed for days after they took you. I tried to get into the big house, tried to see you, hold you. They whipped me for it, 10 lashes across my back. I still have the scars." She pulled down the back of her dress slightly, and I watched Victoria's face crumble as she saw the raised scars on Sarah's dark skin. Evidence of a mother's desperate love. "Because of me," Victoria whispered. "You were whipped because of me." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I was whipped because of a system that said I didn't have the right to my own child, that said the color of your skin determined whether you could be loved by your own mother. But I never stopped loving you, Victoria. Every day I saw you in the big house, wearing pretty dresses, learning to read, playing piano, my heart broke and rejoiced at the same time. You were alive, you were healthy, you were mine, even if you didn't know it." Grace was crying silently. "I never knew. All those years, I never knew I had a sister." "I couldn't tell you," Sarah said. "Master Whitmore threatened to sell you away if I ever told anyone the truth, so I kept the secret. I watched both my daughters grow up, separated by a few hundred yards and an impossible distance. I watched one of you suffer while the other thrived, and I couldn't do anything about it. Until the festival," I added, "until you decided the truth was more important than safety." Sarah nodded. "I realized I was going to lose one of my daughters anyway. Victoria's plan would have killed Grace. Keeping silent was going to result in murder. So I spoke up. Even if it meant my death, at least both my girls would know the truth." Victoria stood up abruptly and walked to the cabin door. She looked out at the dark fields, at the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. The smell of jasmine drifted on the night breeze. "I wasted so many years," she said softly, "so many years hating Grace, hating myself, though I didn't know why. I felt something was wrong with me, that I didn't fit in my own skin. Now I know why. I was living a lie." Grace joined her at the door. They stood side by side, 2 silhouettes against the starlight, one slightly darker than the other, but otherwise identical. "We can't get those years back," Grace said, "but we have now, we have tomorrow, we have each other." "I don't know how to be a sister," Victoria admitted. "I don't know how to be a daughter to Sarah. I don't know how to be this." "Neither do I," Grace said.
I never had a sister before either. We'll figure it out together. Healing isn't linear. It's messy and painful and takes longer than you think. But it's possible. Even from the deepest wounds, new growth can emerge. 3 years passed. Our little community grew. More freed slaves joined us, people looking for a place where they could live with dignity. We built more cabins, planted more crops, created something that resembled a real town. Children played in the yards, old folks sat on porches telling stories. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Victoria and Grace became inseparable. They worked together, ate together, slept in the same room. They developed their own language, finishing each other's sentences, knowing what the other was thinking with just a look. The bond that had been severed at birth was finally restored. But danger never really left us alone. There were white people who couldn't accept what we represented. The idea of black and white living as equals, of a white woman choosing to live as black, threatened everything they believed about their world. The attack came on a cold November night. I woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of screaming. Men on horses surrounded our property, wearing white hoods, carrying torches. The Ku Klux Klan had found us. "Get out," they shouted. "Get out or we'll burn you out." Sarah grabbed Grace and Victoria, trying to get them to the root cellar where we could hide, but Victoria pulled away. "No," she said firmly, "I'm not hiding anymore." "Victoria, please," Grace begged. "They'll kill you." "Then they kill me, but I'm not going to cower while they destroy what we've built." Victoria walked out onto the porch, her head high. I followed her, my heart pounding with terror. The leader of the mob pulled off his hood. It was Richard Blackwood, Victoria's former fiancé. His face was twisted with rage. "Victoria Whitmore," he spat her name like it was poison. "Look at you, living like a nigger, degrading yourself. You could have been my wife. You could have lived in a mansion. Instead, you chose this." "I chose truth," Victoria said calmly. "I chose family. I chose love over lies." "You chose to be a traitor to your race," Richard shouted. "You're white, Victoria. Your skin is white. You should be with your own kind." "My kind?" Victoria laughed. "Richard, I'm my mother's daughter, Sarah's daughter. That makes me whatever she is. If you want to call me black, fine. If you want to call me white, fine. I don't care anymore about your labels and your rules." Grace came out onto the porch and stood beside her sister. They linked hands, unified. "We're twins," Grace said loudly so all the mob could hear. "Born the same night, from the same mother, blood of the same blood. The only difference between us is that the sun kissed my skin darker, but underneath we're identical. We're sisters, and we're not leaving our home." Richard's face went purple with rage. "Then you'll both burn with it." He raised his torch, ready to throw it onto our cabin roof. But before he could, Sarah stepped forward. She moved in front of her daughters, shielding them with her own body. "You want to burn something?" Sarah said. "Then burn me first. Burn the woman who gave birth to both these girls. Burn the mother who has spent her whole life watching her children suffer because of the color of their skin. But you won't touch my daughters, not while I'm breathing." The mob hesitated. Something about Sarah's courage, her fearlessness, made them pause. These were men used to terrorizing people who cowered, who begged for mercy. They didn't know how to handle defiance. "You're all fools," Sarah continued, her voice ringing out in the cold night air, "fighting over skin color like it means something, like it makes one person worth more than another. My daughters are the same blood, same bone, same soul. One just happened to be born a little darker, and you're ready to kill them both because you can't accept that simple truth?
"That's not natural," someone in the mob shouted. "Whites and blacks aren't supposed to mix." "Then why do we?" Sarah shot back. "Why have there been mixed children born on every plantation across the South? Why do white masters sneak into slave quarters at night? Why do children come in every shade if it's so unnatural?" The questions hung in the air, unanswerable, because everyone knew the truth. Everyone knew about the mixed-race children, the secret families, the web of lies that held the entire system together. Richard lowered his torch slightly, uncertainty crossing his face. "This isn't over," he finally said. "You can't change society. You can't make people accept this abomination." "We don't need you to accept us," Victoria said firmly. "We accept ourselves. That's enough." The mob left that night without burning our homes, but they'd be back. We all knew it. The hatred ran too deep, the fear too strong. "We can't stay here," I said once they were gone. "They'll kill us next time." "Then we go north. Canada. I've heard there are communities there where mixed families can live in peace." "Running again," Victoria said bitterly, "always running from hatred." "No," corrected Sarah, "not running from, running toward a place where my daughters can raise children without fear, where being twins of different colors isn't a death sentence." They decided to leave Louisiana. It broke my heart, but I understood. The South would never accept them. The hatred was woven too deeply into the soil, watered with too much blood, fed by too many lies. I helped them prepare for the journey. We packed what little they owned into a wagon. Sarah, Grace, and Victoria, along with a few other families from our community, would travel north together. Safety in numbers. Sometimes survival means leaving everything you know behind. Sometimes love means letting go of the past to reach for the future.
The morning they left was cold and gray. Fog hung over the fields like a ghost. I stood with them by the wagon, trying not to cry and failing miserably. "Come with us," Grace said, holding my hands. "Please, Margaret, your family too." I shook my head. "I'm too old for such a journey. Besides, someone needs to stay here, keep the story alive, make sure people remember what happened." Victoria hugged me tightly. This woman who 3 years ago wouldn't have touched a slave was now embracing me like a sister. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for telling the truth when it mattered. Thank you for saving Grace's life. Thank you for helping me find my sister." Sarah was the hardest goodbye. This woman who had suffered so much, lost so much, and still found the strength to love, to forgive, to fight. "Tell their story," Sarah said to me. "Tell people about the twin sisters separated by skin color. Tell them about a mother who never stopped loving both her daughters. Tell them that love is stronger than hate, that truth is more powerful than lies." "I will," I promised. "I'll tell everyone who will listen." As the wagon pulled away, I watched the three of them sitting together, Sarah in the middle, Grace on one side, Victoria on the other. The former slave and her twin sisters, one black and one white, heading north toward freedom and an uncertain future. They wrote to me over the years. They made it to Canada, to a small town near Toronto. They built a house there, the three of them, and lived together as family. Grace married a freed slave who'd also escaped north. Victoria never married. She said after Richard, she'd learned that true love wasn't about skin color or social standing, but about seeing someone's soul. Victoria became a teacher, educating both black and white children in the same classroom. It was revolutionary for the time. She used her education, her voice, to fight for equality. Grace became a midwife, helping bring new lives into the world, making sure no mother ever had to give up her child because of skin color. And Sarah? Sarah lived to be 78 years old, surrounded by her daughters and grandchildren. She died peacefully in her sleep, finally at rest after a lifetime of suffering. They buried her in the spring when the flowers were blooming. Both her daughters stood over her grave, holding hands, crying for the mother who had loved them both, despite a system designed to keep them apart. Victoria wrote me about Sarah's funeral. She said in the letter, "We buried her between two oak trees. One tree grows toward the east, catching the morning sun. The other grows toward the west, bathed in afternoon light. They're different, but they're connected by the same roots underground, drawing from the same earth. Just like Grace and me, just like all of us, really. Different on the surface, but connected where it matters." I'm an old woman now myself. My hands shake as I write this story down, but I promised Sarah I would tell it, and I keep my promises. The story of Victoria and Grace isn't just about two sisters. It's about all of us, about how we let lies divide us, how we let something as meaningless as skin color determine who is human and who is property, who is worthy of love and who deserves only suffering. Their story is a mirror. When you look at it, you see your own prejudices reflected back. You see the ways you've judged people by their appearance. You see the systems you've supported, knowingly or not, that separate families and destroy lives. But their story is also hope. It's proof that love can survive even the cruelest circumstances, that families can be rebuilt, that truth, no matter how painful, is better than comfortable lies, that we are all more than the color of our skin. I think about that night when Victoria was planning to poison Grace. I think about how close they came to never knowing each other, how easily hatred could have won. But it didn't. Truth won. Love won. Family won. The most powerful rebellions aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with love, with truth, with refusing to accept the lies that society tells us about who deserves dignity and who doesn't. Before Victoria died, she lived to be 63, outlived by Grace by 2 years. She wrote me one final letter. In it, she said something I've never forgotten. "Margaret, people ask me if I regret learning the truth. They say I could have lived my whole life in luxury, never knowing I had a black mother and a twin sister. They say ignorance would have been easier. But I tell them this: I would rather live one day as my true self than a lifetime as a beautiful lie. Grace was the mirror I needed to see my own soul, and in that mirror, I finally learned what it means to be human." And that's the heart of it, isn't it? We're all mirrors for each other. When we look at someone different from us, we're seeing a reflection of our own humanity. When we separate people by color, by class, by any arbitrary division, we're shattering that mirror. We're destroying our ability to see ourselves clearly. Victoria and Grace spent the rest of their lives trying to put the mirror back together, trying to show people that twins born on the same night from the same womb are sisters regardless of skin color, that love doesn't need to ask permission, that families are built on truth, not lies. I'm 92 years old now. I've lived long enough to see slavery end, though I've also lived long enough to see that freedom on paper doesn't mean freedom in reality. The fight continues. The mirror is still broken in so many places. But I hold on to hope.
I hold on to the memory of those 3 women, Sarah, Grace, and Victoria, who refused to let hatred win, who chose each other despite everything the world said about them, who proved that love, real love, doesn't see color. It just sees souls.